Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big, complex topics shaping our world.
For years, we've basically handed over our entire digital lives to just a handful of giant companies. We just assume they're invincible. But a recent string of massive outages has ripped the curtain back, exposing a huge vulnerability right at the heart of the internet. It turns out these pillars are a lot more fragile than any of us thought.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll tackle the illusion of reliability that we've all kind of bought into. Then, we're going to do a full-on autopsy of a major failure to see exactly how these things fall apart. After that, we'll look at some recent case studies that show the cracks are getting bigger. And finally, we'll explore what's next, a decentralized future that might be our best way out of this mess. So, we're living in this really strange paradox right now. On one hand, we're building these mind-blowing AIs with incredible power, but on the other, the very foundation they're built on, this centralized cloud computing model, is turning out to be shockingly shaky. The fragility of the cloud isn't some theoretical problem anymore. It's a real-world, operational nightmare. I mean, really think about it. Almost everything you do online, watching a movie, hopping on a work call, ordering food, it all runs through servers owned by just a tiny handful of companies. This concentration, it's given us amazing scale for sure, but it's also created a ticking time bomb. We've built these single points of failure that are so massive, when they go down, they can literally erase billions of dollars from the global economy in just a few hours. To really get a grip on this fragility, we've got to look at the colossal Amazon Web Services outage back in late 2025. It is the perfect case study, a blueprint for how a centralized system can go spectacularly wrong. See, these gigantic systems are vulnerable because of what we can call a trilogy of risks. First, you've got infrastructure concentration. Everything's all piled up in a few giant data centers. Second, there are these incredibly complex interdependencies. Think of it like a giant tangled ball of yarn. All the little services are so woven together that pulling on one wrong thread can unravel the whole thing. And third, there's no automatic plan B. When a big piece breaks, there's often nothing in place to take over instantly. So on October 20th, 2025, a single bad software update, just one update, got pushed to two of AWS's biggest regions. And that kicked off this catastrophic chain reaction. Core services like DNS, which is basically the internet's address book, just vanished. All of a sudden, huge platforms we use every day like Netflix, Zoom, and Slack were just gone. It paralyzed huge chunks of the global economy for hours. And the financial fallout? It was just staggering. The estimated global economic loss from just a handful of hours of downtime was almost $3 billion. That is the real-world price tag for our total dependence on these centralized giants. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. If you look at where that money was lost, the biggest hits were in places like social media and streaming. Businesses whose entire model depends on being on all the time. This isn't just a big number. It shows you the direct, minute-by-minute financial bleeding that happens when the digital backbone of our economy just snaps. In this donut chart, man, this says it all. A whopping 70% of the applications that went dark had put all of their eggs in one basket. They were running everything in one single geographic region, with absolutely no backup plan to switch somewhere else if it failed. And that just poured gasoline on the fire. Now, that huge AWS outage, it wasn't a fluke. It was a warning shot. And as we got into early 2026, we started seeing the exact same patterns of fragility pop up in two very different but very popular services, the social media giant Instagram and the super advanced AI chatbot, Grok. And these two failures show us two different flavors of disaster. With Instagram, it was something called cascading degradation. Basically, a problem in one small area, the direct messages, created a domino effect. With Grok, though, it was a delivery pipeline failure. Its incredibly powerful AI brain was working just fine, but the front door to actually get to it was slammed shut. The Instagram failure on March 11th was almost surgical. For a lot of people, the main feed, the core of the app, just kept on working. But a massive 71% of people who had problems said they couldn't even get into the app properly. It's just a perfect example of how a failure in one tiny interconnected piece can lock the front door for millions. Grok's problems, on the other hand, weren't just a one-day thing. It was more like a chronic illness. All through the first quarter of 2026, the AI was just constantly sick. We're talking gateway errors, crashes, and then complete authentication failures that just kicked millions of users out of their accounts. So, here's the crucial point.
XAI has this thing called Colossus. It's the world's largest AI supercomputer with 200,000 GPUs. It's an absolute beast. But all that power means nothing if the digital gatekeeper, the simple login system, breaks. The AI is still in there, it just can't talk to anyone. It's completely silenced.
So after all these high-profile disasters, the industry is finally waking up. Businesses are starting to realize that putting all of your faith and all of your data into one single centralized cloud, well, it's just asking for trouble. We're really seeing a massive shift in thinking. That old cloud-first idea, that the cloud is always the best answer, is dying out. In its place, we're seeing a much smarter, strategic hybrid approach. It's all about being smart and putting your computing power where it actually makes the most sense, whether that's in a giant data center or right there on a device in your hand. This new strategy for building systems that don't break rests on three key pillars. First, using those hybrid architectures, a smart mix of public cloud and private local stuff. Second, moving AI processing out to the edge, which just means getting it closer to you and your device. And third, creating these really clever multi-cloud failover systems that can automatically jump between providers, like from AWS to Google, if one of them has a bad day. And a huge part of this future is the rise of smaller, leaner AI. Gartner predicts that by 2027, we'll be using these small, specialized AI models 3 times more often than the giant one-size-fits-all models that get all the headlines today. This is the whole world of edge AI. So instead of your home security camera sending video all the way to a server on the other side of the country to figure out what it's seeing, the camera itself becomes smart enough to spot a problem. It's faster, it's way more private, and best of all, it still works even if your internet connection goes down. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, the very definition of what it means to be a strong, competitive digital business is changing right here, right now. For a long time, this centralized cloud gave us incredible scale, but we paid a price for it. We lost resilience. Now, the real power, the true competitive edge, is shifting. It's moving to systems that are independent, autonomous, and don't need to be tied to some fragile giant in the sky. And that leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. After spending the last decade or so pushing every single byte of data we have into these massive centralized data centers, is the future of intelligence actually about pulling it all back out? Is the next great leap forward not going to happen in the cloud, but out here in the world all around us, closer to where we actually live and work?